Hey y'all, and welcome to another video of My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we read books, where we DIY, we make art, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today we are going to be talking about my September wrap-up of books. We are going to be going through some in-depth reviews of what I read last month. I do have some individual reviews on my Instagram if you want to check that out at Kel Sweetie. But today we'll be talking quite a bit about how my experience was this last month, because I really feel like it's just been a mixed bag. I think that I've read some really good books, and I definitely DNF'd, for now, one of the books that I read. So yeah, let's get into that. So before we start off, this is one of the first videos that I'm recording after learning about the passing of Michael Gambon. Some of you may know was the actor who played Dumbledore in the Harry Potter franchise movies. If you see behind me, I actually have a couple of my Dumbledore things, and I even have Snape and Hagrid, since we did lose both of them the last couple of years. As you may know, while I may hate the woman who made that franchise because she doesn't know what she made, I do love the books. And one of my favorite quotes is by Dumbledore, and it is, "After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next adventure." It makes me cry every time I hear it, because it's a very true line and everything. So yeah, I understand they're fictional characters, but those characters say a lot of real stuff, and that is why people love them. So I just wanted to start off with that little bit of remembrance before we get into books I'm reading now. I want to shout out some fictional characters and books that I've read before. So yeah. Okay, let's get into the wrap up. So, as I said before, this last September has been a very interesting month. I don't think that it's been like a 5-star read type of month, but it wasn't that bad either. I feel like it was a middle of the road type of month with the type of ratings I gave books. I passed my Goodreads Mount challenge from last year, which was, I think I read 39 books last year, and this month I actually passed it. So let's give a little shout out for that. I will be doing a separate video to kind of celebrate that as we move into the rest of the year, since we have 4 more months left. And it's crazy that I've already read as many books as I read last year with 4 more months to go. So that's exciting. Let's hope I can beat whatever I do this year, next year. I've not beat my Goodreads goal for this year yet. I'm about 20 books off, which I'm hoping I knock that out of the park with the challenge that I've given myself for this upcoming month. but we will see. I think I should just get into some of the reviews of the books that I've read this month, and you'll kind of see where I'm heading as far as like why I can't really call it like an amazing month. It's not a bad month, just a lukewarm month. So let's go one by one into like why that is. Starting off with a book that I put down because it had to be a physical read, and was able to finally pick back up once an audiobook was available, The Push. This 5 stars. 5 stars, 5 stars. It was so, it was it's not a long book. I think it's only like, let me see, 300 pages. Like, this is not a long book, but it was such a hard book because of the content. It has to do with postpartum depression, the conversation of losing yourself after having a child as a mother, the conversation of being gaslit by your partner, because of those feelings you are having, because of the assumption that the happiest thing that could ever happen to you is becoming a mother, the most fulfilling thing that could ever happen to you as a mother is becoming a mother. And as somebody who does not want children personally, for some of the reasons that are talked about in this book, the selfishness, the loss of self, the just not wanting the experience itself and being pressured by society or whomever or responsibility to do so, is talked about heavily in this book. And the idea of generational trauma passing through the women who decide to keep having children. It was hard to read. Now keep in mind that the backdrop of this book is a mother who believes that her daughter is a sociopath killer from a very young age. And while that should be the part that is most disturbing of this book and the hardest to read about this book, it somehow ends up being, while not necessarily easier than some of the conversations of generational trauma in this book. Well, I should probably give you a synopsis. Blythe Connor, it's from her point of view mainly, and she is your main character. She is the mother of Violet. She ends up having Violet even though she has some trepidation about having children because of her experience with her mother, who ended up leaving her and her father when she was, I think, around 11 or 12, I believe she was. But before she had left, there was a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional abuse that she inflicted on her. It was clear that a lot of that had to do with the fact of her not necessarily wanting a child but having one regardless, and being in a marriage that she no longer felt like she was in love in, and this feeling of being trapped and having a real acute depression and it not being treated. But also at the same time, you're also getting the point of view of her mother being in the relationship with her mother, who was extremely physically abusive. And it bounces back and forth between these point of views in order to give context for why Blythe is also so committed to trying to make it work as a mother, but also at the same time is completely aware of the psychological genetics that the women in her family have. And her partner just ends up gaslighting it all. She's just like, our kid is not normal. She's pushing kids, she's pulling out kids' hair on purpose. There's something here that's not just, I don't know right from wrong. And she realizes it from a young age of even 3 or 4. She's in pre-K, doing things that are just calculated and that aren't necessarily making sense, that you know the difference between not just right and wrong, but you don't care to know the difference. There is some things that happen in this book, but the way that it's told, you spend a lot of the book wondering if it really is true, or is Blythe really just experiencing the same sort of postpartum depression that her grandmother and her mother experienced as well, and she just has something out against Violet, and Violet is just responding to having a mother who does not love her. I will say that the ending of this book, and I think one thing you'll probably read on the reviews of Goodreads and stuff, is that if you read enough thriller books, you kind of know how the ending of this is gonna go. And while, yes, I think you know the ending, there's only so many ways a trope like that can go. One of two ways. Either she's crazy or she's not. I think the way that it's done, is it supposed to be like, oh my god, that shocked me and I didn't see that coming, but rather a disappointment. I really love books and thrillers about mother-daughter relationships. Like, one of my favorite books that I surprisingly read this year was Baby Teeth, and it was another book about a mother and her sociopathic daughter. Somehow I read that book and ended up calling my mother and having a huge conversation about having a child young, especially back when she had me, which was only in the 90s. the idea of, or like a responsibility to have a child, rather than it being a choice, being like the next step in you becoming an adult. Like, you have to do it. And also like not fully thinking out the idea of what that means to be quote unquote adult now that you're having a child, when in all honesty you are a child. But nobody has framed the fact that you are a child, because back then it was like the idea and the framing of what being an adult and being a child is has changed so much, where a lot of women are saying, but I don't want that, and that isn't necessary for me to be a fully grown adult living a fully capable life. And that's why there's so much debate on it, when there shouldn't be. It should be like straight up like, okay, great, have fun. So reading this book just uncovered a lot, and it was hard for me to read because I feel like it really spoke out some of my biggest fears and my biggest internal struggle with the idea of ever becoming a mom. The main character isn't likable, and a lot of people say that's a bad thing too. I don't need to like the characters I'm reading about. They don't need to be likable. They just need to be interesting. And another book I'm going to be reviewing will come back to this, and it'll be a theme, I think, for this video, because I just think people forget that. Like, you don't have to like want the character to win or understand the character so much that you're like, oh, I like you so much, I get you. It's just like, no, you just need to like find them interesting enough to keep learning about them. And while I did not like Blythe, I found her interesting. Now, did I not like Blythe as much as I did not like Fox, her partner? No, that man can shrivel up and die. I hated him. He was horrible. He gaslit her the entire time. He had the audacity of, I don't want to give too much away, but this is not good. And not only was he not good, he also was a humongous misogynist. Because another thing that I think this book really takes apart is the idea that because you are genetically a female, or whatever the case is, that you are a woman or presenting woman, that must mean that you have this tender motheriness inside of you. That means that you are not capable of being a serial killer. I don't want to go on and on about it, but I feel like if you are looking for a book that takes apart that whole patriarchy of a child possible of being a murderer, a woman possible of being a murderer, the idea that every woman literally has some nurturing gene inside of her that just needs to be activated, and the conversation of choosing motherhood over being forced into motherhood, pick up this book. Pick it up immediately. It is so good, and I think that it does such a great job of taking those things apart. If you have those questions or want to know more about people who are that way, this book will really, I think, act out that divide. 5 stars. 5 stars all the way. Ashley Audrain did so good on this. The next book that I read this month was a complete shift, and that is because I felt like it was necessary for me to read it, considering I did work for it, and that was House Party by not one author, but 10. Angeline Boulet, Jerry Craft, Natasha Diaz, Lamar Giles, Christina Hammonds-Reed, Ryan LaSala, Emil Said Mendez, Justin A. Reynolds, Randy Rebay, Jasmine Warga. It was such an honor. This is my first cover. I still get so excited seeing like the jacket and how it was designed. Thank you again to Casey over at Penguin Random House. This is just such a joy to work on. As soon as I got the physical copy, I realized I should probably read the book, because I'm sitting here telling people, go pick up this book that I did the cover for, and I've not read it. So I had heard that the audiobook had a full cast, and that was exciting because I love a good full cast. As soon as it was available, I started to reading it. Now, please keep in mind, I don't know what booktuber I was listening to, but they were stating that there is no middle grade books anymore, and I fully agreed with them. There's no middle grade anymore. It jumps from elementary to YA easily, and so many adults are reading YA now that YA doesn't even read like YA. It's a weird time to be looking for a book for a middle grade 12-year-old. You know, it's a little bit happy-go-lucky writing. Keep that in mind, as I'm a 20-something who usually reads things like The Push that I just talked about, and then going into this. So I barely even read romance, so happy-go-lucky isn't usually my swerve. But I will say it was very interesting. Like, I wasn't necessarily bored at any point during reading the book. Again, I'm not the audience for this book. The audience for this book, I think, is going to rate it definitely 4 or 5 stars. It's very interesting. However, you really notice the difference in writing for each one of these characters. While it's interesting to hear the different tones of people because they're writing for different people, so it's very jarring to be like, oh, there's definitely a new person talking. And whether or not you like those writing styles. So if you're like, yeah, this person sounds different because it's being written by a different person, but I don't really prefer their writing style, it makes it harder for you to enjoy their story because you're sitting there the entire time going, I'm not a big fan of this writing style, as opposed to others where, you know, you're like, oh, I love this writing style. I could get way more of this. But then by the time you've settled in, we're on to the next point of view of somebody in the house party. A little synopsis. DeAndre, who is the jock of the school, is throwing a end of year graduation party for the seniors. They live in Chicago, and essentially this book is everything that takes place at the party from different point of views of people who are at the party, and they're from different walks of life of people in high school. So you have the artist, and you have the actor, and you have the jock, and the popular girl, and the musician, and the outcast, and, you know, this, that, and the other. And I really, really loved that plot for this book straight off the bat. I love Savoy, and I think that that portion was written by Ryan LaSala. Shout out to their writing style. I loved whenever we switched to Savoy's voice. They're a non-binary high schooler who is an influencer, definitely growing up lower middle class or lower class. To read about Savoy and Miranda's queer relationship. Miranda is a trans high school woman, also an influencer in high school, and they both are frenemies and in a secret relationship. I loved their portions. I felt like they were dynamic. I felt like their relationship, while they were talking, they weren't one-sided. They didn't feel flat. You wanted to actually know these kids. Cy Navarro, he's a musician. I like some of his portions as well, speaking to his friends and dealing with the issues of their band. Cameron, he's the artist, and his part is in entirely a graphic novel portion. I thought that was hilarious for him to be like speaking in pictures. There were portions like that that were amazing. Then there were like other portions. Zara. I really didn't like Zara's portions. I understood a little bit of what I think the writer was trying to portray with Zara, which is this undercurrent of depression. But it also came off, her story ends up being very fast, doesn't make a lot of sense, kind of really gives red flags of being obsessive. Yeah, I just didn't too much care for her, and not just because of the writing style, like with a few of these, but really because of a little bit of the messaging. While I mean, I'm all for there being an outcast in here who's struggling with depression and struggling with identity and all of that, I felt like it made this like weird left turn when a romantic interest from nowhere is involved, and then within the span of like 2 hours, if that, they're essentially like head over heels in love with each other. And even that the character who end up being a love interest for her, also it just kind of, it gives a lot of codependency, which is a concern when you've become so concerned with Zara and her mental health because of some of the things that she said about not being seen and depression and this, that, and the other. So I just feel like her story didn't sit well with me, and it wasn't just, oh, I don't like necessarily how they're writing her, but just more so the story itself. I felt like it just kind of started to feel a bit rushed and moved in a weird direction in order for her to get a happier ending instead of one that was depressing. I feel like, of course, could have been one of two ways, but I feel like there are some people who do not reach that certainty about their identity or get through their depression until they are graduated out of high school, until they are in college or just out of that social structure and everything. And I would have rathered when we hit that 5-year, like there was some hope that maybe we were given at the party if we wanted to go in a more positive route. And then when we did the 5 years later thing, which they do in here, you found out that Zara ended up, going to school and joining these clubs, or her roommate ended up being a huge help in her finding her identity and who she was and just confidence and pulling her out of that depression because she just realized it really was her finding her tribe. Instead, you just leave kind of feeling more worried for Zara because you're kind of sitting there like, well, that's not healthy. I think it was hard to rate this one because I knew that I wasn't the intended audience and that I was reading this in order to better, know about it, to tell somebody maybe for its intended audience. I think for me personally as a book, it's a 3. I think for, an overall, being completely just looking at the book, I would definitely give it more of a 4.5, because I really think that this is a great book for somebody in the intended audience. Go pick up House Party for your younger niece or nephew, The next book I read was a complete 180 from that. That's You. I feel like I loved the show. What's his name? Penn Badgley played Joe Goldberg so well. He made Joe very likable when Joe is not a likable character. And even he goes on press junkets going, Joe sucks. Please do not go out and find a Joe. Do not romanticize Joe because he is not a good person. He is not a good man. Don't go out and find your own Joe because Joe sucks. I mean, he's a serial killer, and obsessive. So there you go. But he's so likable that you're like, I could see how you fell for that guy. The Joe in this book, which is what that show is based off of, is not likable. It's all from his point of view as well, just like how the show is. He comes off like holier than thou. I know better than anyone about anything. Which, keep in mind, in the show, there are nudges to that in Joe's personality, but in this it comes off as no, I'm better than you. I'm better than all of you. I know better than you, and I know better. Just in this way that was so unlikable that you're just like, oh my god, somebody take me out of my misery. I already was listening to this guy all day. How do you guys find him attractive? And that was the thing that really I did not like, is that in the show, what was scary was that you could sit there and go, I can see how people are finding Joe attractive. In this book, I'm not seeing how anything is working for him, how anything he's doing is been attractive whatsoever. His internal monologue is horrible. It's super creepy. I mean, in the show, yes, he's doing some creepy things. In the book, it goes to Creepsville. I mean, it just went, I feel like it was already not going well, and then it went real, okay, now I'm a serial killer, obsessive killer, staring at you and I'm not blinking. And that's not why You was so good. And Beck, I mean, even in the show, I didn't too much care for her. And this, she's horrible, because then you're just sitting there like, Joe, why do you like her? There is so much in this book about Beck where you're just like, there's nothing redeemable whatsoever. In the show, I think that you don't too much care for her either, but she doesn't come off as a complete bimbo airhead. You're just a bad character, just to be a bad character. And I think that's the thing is that, like, going back to, they just have to be interesting. They don't necessarily have to be likable. I feel like I started finishing it just because I really wanted to see how it ended. Which, oh my god, I've been talking about this and I have no synopsis. Joe Goldberg, they're in New York. Joe Goldberg is an obsessive man who works in a bookstore. When Guinevere Beck walks into his shop one day, he thinks she's absolutely beautiful, and he automatically becomes obsessed with her. He puts it in his mind that they're going to end up together. He falls in love with her, starts stalking her, and essentially she doesn't know any of this is going on. And in the long term, he ends up basically getting into a relationship with her. It becomes, while at first it seems like this is something that's actually happening and she's never going to find out, and she's having feelings for him, of course, she ends up finding out and things ensue from there. You just get this obsessive guy who's obsessing over this girl who probably doesn't need to be obsessed over because she's obsessed with herself. I'm just disappointed. All in all, I think I ended up rating this a 3, but now talking about it out loud, I may go back to my Goodreads and rate it a 2. I think maybe let's meet in the middle and it's going to be a 2.5. I really think that because if I had not watched the show and I read this book, I feel like I would have even DNF'd the book because the book itself is just not good. The show is good. I mean, except for season 4, season 4 is crap, but seasons 1 through 3 are pretty good. This is not good. Do yourself a favor. You don't need to read the book. I thought reading the book may be even better. I'll get some context. It may even be more like mysterious or thrilling or something. It wasn't. I just ended up hating the characters. Okay, speaking of disappointment, let's just go right into my next book that I read, and that was Bullet Train. I read this book because I love the movie that is currently on Netflix. Do yourself a favor, go watch the Netflix movie. It's about all these assassins on a train, and it's basically a 6 degrees of separation story of how their stories all connect. That is the simple synopsis of it. Found out it was a book. I said I have to read the book because the book's got to be better. Nope. It's not bad. It's just not the movie. This is another practical magic situation where somehow the movie is better than the book this time. They have changed the characters so much. They do not seem like the characters in the movie anymore. Lemon has been completely changed as a character. The wolf has completely changed as a character. Tangerine even doesn't. They've changed some things about that character. The prince, the kid, tons of things were changed about that character. I think also, this is a translated novel. It was originally written in Japanese. This is the second Japanese novel I have read. Actually, no, I think it's the third. But if we take as memory police, this is the second Japanese novel I've read this year. It would have been Ring. And we all know that I hate Ring. I truly, truly hated Ring. I have not watched the movie, but I know for a fact that they have changed many things in The Ring from talking to other people who have watched the movie and then read the book because they liked the movie. And they said they had to change so many things about this book because there's no way that it would have passed for American audiences. And one thing that I've noticed is a weird Lolita obsession. Keep in mind, 2 men wrote these books, and both of these books were made by very masculine men. So again, culture differences. But there is a very strange Lolita obsession. This obsession with borderline pedophilia, and it being thrown around like somebody just asked what color the sky is. It's really uncomfortable. It's very strange because in Ring, we experience the exact same dialogue of this Lolita underage sex. That was my first ick. That's an ick for me. That's a huge ick for me. At 33%, I DNF'd it. I don't know when I may pick it back up. I have every intention to pick it back up, but I don't know when. It may be the same time I pick back up Book Eaters. I may have a month where I go, let me try and reread all of the books that I DNF'd. We'll see how that goes. But until then, this was DNF. The last book that I read this month That was Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell. It's a romance novel. Savvy Sheldon is a plus-size girl. She has gained some weight in a relationship because of her working hours and stress. Basically, her boyfriend of many years ends up leaving her. Quite rudely. Horribly, actually. And Savvy is down on her luck and she has these ideas to get a revenge body to try and kind of coerce him back, but also get back at him. She then meets Spencer and essentially things happen and her and Spencer fall in love. That's the synopsis. I think that I was expecting to be surprised by this one, like how I was surprised by Take a Hint, Danny Brown, which was a romance novel I devoured, loved it, 5 stars. At some point, I'll read her other 2 sisters. I've also heard that that's probably like the best one in the series, but I absolutely loved it. The characters in there were great. They were interesting. I actually cared if they fell in love. There was actual conflict that happened. The spicy scenes were top tier. It was great. This was boring. Savvy as a character, I was bored by. I wanted to know about her friends Joni and Mags more than I wanted to know about her. She was very agreeable. She was I couldn't really pick out one thing about her personality. Like if you were going, hey, describe Savvy's personality, I couldn't tell you. Because she had a very bland personality. There was not one thing that I was really like, wow, what a personality. Like and just as there was nothing memorable about her, there was nothing memorable about Spencer, her love interest at all either. I literally felt like he literally existed in this bubble of Savvy. You knew nothing of him outside of what Savvy saw with her eyes, and that was his dog, and that he was a contractor. And you only found out that he had a bungalow in Silver Lake, which, when did he buy that? But you only found out that he had a bungalow in Silver Lake after Savvy finds out. So you know nothing of what Spencer or who Spencer is whatsoever. Just that he's treating her nicely. And not even overtly nicely, to be honest with you. I don't find this book empowering as a plus-size woman. Savvy spent the entire book working out in an effort to lose the weight that she had. And to be honest with you, she had no real issue with the weight that she had until her boyfriend broke up with her. Her ex broke up with her and pointed it out and pointed that she'd let herself go and this, that, and the other. So she starts doing tennis and hot yoga in an effort to lose the weight and get a revenge body. Now, by the end of the book, she's started to tone and gain muscle. She's not lost weight, which I appreciated. I appreciated that they didn't just go, her life got better because she lost weight, but more so, she started to tone up and gain some muscle because she was moving her body around. And so, therefore, she started to look better and feel better because of her body was just working for her better. And people were noticing that. I liked that. I will say that. But what I did not like is that there really wasn't much of a conversation on that, an internal conversation with Savvy on that. You came to those own conclusions by noticing what was going on and how the scenes were being described. There's multiple other things that happen in this book. Like there's a whole chapter about a tennis practice that happens for Savvy, and it goes nowhere. Like they go into full detail about the tennis game and how it was played and who did what and who volleyed what back, and then afterwards it's like, okay, that was a great game of practice, and they go home. It's just like, why did we get all that detail for a tennis game? And while I completely can appreciate what they were trying to do here, I think that a lot of books that are romance novels that have people of color in them, and specifically Black people, there was such a strong hold the Zane era had on Black people in romance that we have a whole urban romance section at Barnes & Noble, which, by the way, I think is crap. There is no reason there should be an urban, it's just saying that's Black romance. You are just saying this is where people who are Black and love each other are placed in the bookstore. It's like, those books are romance novels, put them in the romance section. just like any other people are getting their stuff put in the romance section. I hate it. I hate that section so much at Barnes & Noble because it's stupid. So with that being said, while I understand what these types of books are trying to do, which is tell Black romance stories, just like any white romance would be told, take a hint, Dani Brown, and get a live Chloe Brown, and I can't remember what the other Brown sisters doing. All of those books were really great because, again, those books are about women of color falling in love in a romantic rom-com type of way, just as Emily Henry's characters are falling in love. And it's at the same level of interest of writing. I think that the person was so caught up in trying to make it not a Zane novel and try to be in that idea of Black people doing normal stuff that they leaned so far into it that now you have Black people who are boring. As I've thought more about why I didn't like the book, I realized that this has nothing really to do with me not too much caring for romance. I think that the character development just wasn't that great. But it wasn't so bad that I'm like, don't wait. Like, especially if you're a huge romance, like, you eat up romance, I would say, fine, try this book out. If you're like me and you don't read them too often, you're not going to be impressed by this book. 2 stars. And I feel like that's kind of being nice for how I felt about how my time was wasted. So that's my wrap up. I tried to read 5 books. I read 4 full books in the month of September. Like I said, it was a very weird month. The books that I didn't like, I don't know if it was even because they were bad books. I just didn't flow with them. And kind of going over this, I realized that it was a lackluster month. Like, I think it just started off really strong with The Push. And then House Party was fine, but it was also like, I know this isn't necessarily for me. I finished, but I spent the entire time hating the whole trip. Bullet Train, I didn't like enough that I DNF'd. And Savvy Sheldon, I was bored, but I was like, well, let's just read it. Let's see how it ends. I hope going into October with the books I have planned that it's a good one. We'll see. If you read some of these books and you differed from my review, let me know down in the comments why you thought that it was a better book. If you did read some of these and you kind of felt the same about them, also maybe let me know that I'm not crazy down below, and maybe we can start a dialogue about it. If you liked this review video, yeah, it's a movie with how long it's been, but this video, let me know, and make sure to subscribe. I have a bunch of spooky book content coming up this season. I'm really excited for the books that I'm about to read. We'll see if it's any good. I'm going to be trying something different with my next monthly wrap up and everything. Instead of one of these sit down, I will be doing a vlog style as I move through the book, so you guys can get more real-time reactions out of me while I'm reading a book. So we're gonna try that on for size in the next wrap up. Until then, stick around because we are gonna have more book content and tons of spooky content this October. So subscribe down below if you're not already. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.